Hi, welcome everybody. We're going to be giving you a commentary track here for Space, which is now up on Amazon, iTunes, Vudu, YouTube, various other places where you'll be able to find our movie here. And with me today, I'm Monty Light, the writer-director of the film. I have Cooper Holmes, who co-wrote the story of this movie with me, and also Neil Tyler, the producer and director of photography on the film. Also have Mac Light, who is my father and also the music writer of the movie. And then our cast, we have Laura Jean, who played Dr. Ada Gray, and Michael Klug, who played Commander Phil King, middle initial X. There's a little Easter egg for everybody there.
What?
Phil X King and James R. Hilton as Tomcat McMahon. So without further ado, what's going to happen here is we are going to watch the movie and give our thoughts and commentary, tell you about how we made this beast of an independent film that we're all super duper proud of. And you'll be able to watch along with our commentary if you start the film at the same time that we start the film, which is about to happen. Is everybody ready?
Yes.
All right.
Ready.
So I'm going to count us down.
Ready?
That is going to be in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Yay.
Woo!
Woo! So we have our company logos here.
I love the logo.
Yeah.
Me too. Who made it?
Right. So a little bit of a quick backstory about the writing. This was actually a story that was put together by Cooper and I originally like New Year's Eve 2017. That's what I remember.
Oh, 2017 was it then? I know it was a couple bar nights. That's what I remember.
Yeah. It was a couple of us sitting around the bar, and prior to that, we actually had I had been trying to write several different screenplays with the budget that I had, which was based off of me actually going on Price is Right. And let's get right into it before too much more of the movie goes on here. We are in Joshua Tree. Joshua Tree was actually
it was hot.
It was hot. That's true. And it was the first stuff that we ever filmed. Neil, was this the first day?
This was the first day, and then the other half of the daytimes, I think we shot the next morning.
That's right. And what's interesting about this opening, because as you see, it intercuts between exterior stuff at Joshua Tree, which happens one year prior. No, yeah, that's right, Cooper. It actually was completely different in the script. It was more linear, where it like started in Joshua Tree, and then it moved to the stuff in the Udo, and it was in the editing process where I sort of realized that everything would move a lot smoother if it intercut between the two.
Right. So that was a decision in editing.
Yes, exactly. So obviously we see the lovely Laura Jean here, sort of opening up our film along with Kurt Quinn playing Evan Duran. So Laura, you want to talk a little bit about how you came to the project and what really excited you about it?
Oh, well, not this long monologue.
That's right. The whole. If I remember correctly, when we actually shot the stuff where you were talking directly to the camera in the cockpit set, and we'll talk more about our sets because that was a huge part of the film.
Oh yeah, it definitely helped when it came to being involved with each other as a cast and crew and the character. But yeah, we'll talk more about that later. But what is interesting is that people probably wouldn't realize with the new edit is we actually tried. There's actually this really, really long monologue, and I had to basically go through the whole thing And it was very difficult. And shout out to Sherry Davis for being on set and helping me with that. And, you know, we were originally going to have me just talking the whole entire time, I think, right, Monty? That whole scene just kind of went through.
Yes.
And then
a lot of talking heads.
yeah. And then, but it's actually nice to see when I saw the movie for the first time. I didn't know that there was going to be this cut back and forth, but then when I saw it, I go, oh, I kind of like that. You know, I wasn't expecting it, and it works, and it kind of helps you kind of dive more into the relationship between the characters and her attitude before she was on the ship and after, like now being on the ship. It's like she's super excited to be on the ship, and you can tell when, you know, I'm talking to my people out there and letting them know, you know, what it's like to be on the Udo and things like that. And it cuts back to, you know, being on the desert, which personally, I don't like deserts anyway. So you can tell my character definitely doesn't like it either.
Well, that was one of the funny things, and Michael and Jim, you probably both attest to this as well, also with Neil. We actually, you can't tell it all in the film, but the places where Laura and Kurt playing Evan, where they're standing, and where like Justin comes in as Mitch the Bitch, we actually filmed that in, I think, 2 or 3 different places. The wide shots were shot in completely different places than the close-ups, because we couldn't get the equipment, we couldn't get the actors like so far up that we didn't have, I mean, safety was obviously a big concern when you're shooting out in the desert, you know, with the heat and also with all of the rocks.
I
do recall that everyone was listen for rattles. That was kind of a constant warning.
Yeah,
like
I was
hearing rattles?
how far up Neil got, like on those rocks.
It was pretty precarious.
I was the highest.
Yeah. And Dad, actually, what's interesting is this is an example of the beginning part of the film. We talk a little bit about the music, because the music actually is very minimal in the movie, but we made some conscious decisions about when we wanted to use it and when not to use it. And this goes into the whole found footage versus real life part of it. So you want to talk a little bit about how we approached sort of the opening synth music?
The opening synth music is very, very, like you said, minimalist. Also, it's very stretched out, just like the landscape, and stretched out like the dialogue somewhat too. That it's just giving this feeling of open space. That's what I was going for.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about like a heroic theme, which I think is going to come in.
It's coming up pretty soon. That I love to do, because I love writing heroic things, and this one was fairly easy, you know, because he's got such a, you know, you're looking out there, out in the desert, and I live in Las Vegas. I always look out in the desert, and doing something heroic like that, it was a joy to write that.
Yeah, and Jim, you made your grand entrance here. That was actually, to be honest, that was one of the things that I sort of wish we had more in editing, where there's some close-ups of Jim, but we see enough of his mug later on, don't we, Jim?
Maybe too much.
Never.
No, what are you talking about? A Joshua Tree?
Yeah. I don't think we see your face at all in the opening scene of Joshua Tree, but you've got this really awesome.
It's covered by a hat right here. It's that big old hat.
Well, we see the jacket, man. We got the jacket in there.
Thank you, Neil and Monty, for not showing me a Joshua Tree. I appreciate that. What's interesting, though, is like Michael is wearing a tank top, and everybody else is in T-shirts. And why I'm wearing a
Jim Bruce Springsteen, man. That's your whole character.
I guess so, but it's 90 degrees, and I'm wearing a jacket, even though it's got a flag on the back.
Head ass to the bone, that's all.
Right. So now we're going into our title sequence. I was very happy with this title sequence.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
The
Oh,
total,
it's stunning.
Yeah, I'm not exactly synced up with you guys, but it's playing. So
Okay.
I'm still a Joshua Tree, but go ahead, continue.
Yeah. The title sequence. It's also very
Looks gorgeous.
here. We do this curtain effect. If you notice, we actually changed the aspect ratio from 235 to 185. That's another little visual indication of when we're in the found footage and when we're not, is the aspect ratio. So we're about to get into the Udo set, which we were fortunate enough to get a rental and a build at Fonco Studios in Glendale. And that was an excellent find. Remember that day when we had to actually build it, Neil?
Oh, yeah. It feels like about a week that we compressed into one day, I think, there.
That's what the whole movie feels like.
Yeah.
Sure.
But the good thing is that the cockpit set, we actually was prefabricated with all the lights and the electricals and everything. That's where the captain and Tomcat sit. But the actual like laboratory where most of the Udo takes place, most of the Udo scenes take place, that build was huge. We actually had to move the walls.
Like every single angle, we had to move the walls. Pretty much every day of filming, we were just had these flyaway walls just to get those different angles, which was quite a logistical nightmare.
Actually, yeah, that was an interesting thing. I think the comparison that we were making, Neil, was to, gosh, it almost felt like sitcom making. Didn't we talk about that at one point?
Yeah,
where it's like, it was almost like a 3-camera setup, but we didn't have the luxury of like rolling 3 cameras at once. So here's the really impressive thing, is that we would shoot out all of the scenes that took place in a particular set from one angle. We would fly the wall out. Like if it was supposed to be the angle from the point of view of, let's say, Ada's chair. We filmed that in one day, and then we would come back the next day, fly out another one of the walls, and redo all of the scenes again. So how did you guys, the actors, find that blocking matching?
You know, I'll just go straight into it. Like, I think this is my shout out to all my theater people out there, and for me myself. When you know, it kind of felt like that, like a stage play in a way. You know, we came in, and I think Monty, you had mentioned that before you even handed us the script. You're like, I think we're gonna have to, you know, you're going to have to go through this. We're going to have to do long scenes, and it's going to be like a play. Be ready for it. And luckily, with all my theater background, it actually was fun. It was really fun to do. I'm like, this is actually nice being able to do all these scenes and do it again the next day, all these scenes. And because in reality of film, you do your one scene that one day, and you don't get to really go back to that unless you have to because of a mistake from something or whatever. And we were able to kind of play around with it a little bit more, I think. I think at times, for me specifically, I don't know how anyone else felt, when we did the scene again, I was trying to find ways to dive even deeper and deeper and deeper. And by the end of the week, when it came time to do those really serious scenes, we were there. I felt there as Ada, part of the character, because at this point we were stuck in there doing these scenes over and over again. It felt like we were in space a little bit.
Yeah, I think it was pretty remarkable how small everything was and cramped. I remember it was literally one of those things. I remember sometimes in between, just to like give direction, at least from what I remember, or like for you to get in and change a light or a gel meal. I remember we would have to like move the set chairs out and then move them all back in and be like, where was the seat belt? Where was this? Where was it?
Yeah, lots of iPhone pictures.
How big was it, the set?
how big was the set, Neil?
Yeah.
Big enough. Just get
big
the job
enough.
done.
Just big enough.
Yeah.
Bigger than an actual spaceship. I don't know.
I think I took a behind the scenes video, like of me walking through the whole thing. I still have it. I should send that to you, Monty, so you can post
That's an extra.
It took 5 seconds to walk from one end of the set to the other.
Yeah.
Basically.
It's like 6 big steps.
Set was basically smaller than your walk-in closet at home.
I don't have a walk-in closet.
Walk-in closet with chairs.
Somebody's walk-in closet.
No, I remember Monty and Neil talking about the how they had to build the set from nothing, and just how they had like a limited time and limited budget and all that. And I was thinking, okay, I'm going to walk in. This is going to look like crap, and it was amazing.
Yeah,
it was amazing. The set where Michael, where you and I were sitting, the cockpit, the lab, everything. I was like, how'd you guys do this?
I remember being very impressed by that.
I think 3 different studios before we were able to come to home at Fonco.
And big shout out to them, man. They went above and beyond. They were just incredible. Everyone over there, just like gracious artists that they are, to allow us to do this film there.
Oh my gosh, and they're so supportive of the film. Like, even to this day, they'll repost something that all of us will post about the film, and they're so excited about it. And just like shout out to them for helping us put this amazing film together. I mean, it was this set is just phenomenal. Like, I agree with you, Jim. Like, when I walked in, I was like, what? We did this for only $10,000?
Yeah.
I know.
And actually, there's a lot of little things that I really love in the film. A lot of like little happy accidents. And I think but also a lot of like really smart design decisions that I can't possibly take credit for. But one of the ones that I think was really, really helpful when it came to, because the whole concept of the film is that a lot of the middle part of the movie is based off of closed circuit television, basically, that you're sort of watching these fly on the wall of the interior of the sets, of the crew. You're sort of monitoring the activity. The idea is that you are looking through the eye of Mission Control, of Brightstar, the company back on Earth, and recording that and everything. And it was actually Neil who came up with the idea of, I think it was called diopter.
Mm-hmm. Like a diopter effect. You'd always see it in the 70s of kind of like a split frame. You have 2 things in focus, but dropping in basically a lens in front of the camera that we didn't force with a little sound effect there. So we could punch in from the same angle and just have the little zzz, like a digital zoom, as if it's Brightstar zooming in on that shot, instead of just feeling like an editing trick, because it almost needs to be an AI editing system that's watching everybody there.
Interesting.
Nice.
And I absolutely adored that, because suddenly, rather than playing with 3 angles, I'm playing with like 6 or 7. And it was a lifesaver, really, because once again, when you're sort of conceiving this thing, you'd be like, oh yeah, we'll do a whole film from essentially 5 angles, and that won't get boring. And then you're basically like, oh, interesting. And then, your amazing design team, everybody that worked on the film, just went above and beyond in terms of, like this scene right now. I think we're looking at Jim and Laura kind of after the birthday party for Mitch. And I just love all the little details. Like, one of the helmets in the shot has a party hat on it. And it's just such a cute little detail of like, this is what the crew is doing to sort of keep themselves entertained. There's even a little, I guess you could also call it an Easter egg, on one of the shots right in front of the nanites. There's a little party toy that says boom.
Nice. Foreshadowing.
It's very, very
spoilers.
Like subtle.
And Mac, actually, this is another interesting thing, because we're in the found footage portion of it, where technically there's no music. However,
ambient noise.
Yes, the ambient noise was an interesting piece of decision, just in terms of like when to increase sort of bass notes, when to sort of create the space sound outside the spaceship. And actually, in this scene, one of my favorite moments is at the tail end of it, when Laura and Jim have stopped talking, and actually the bass noise steadily increases, just to give this sense of unease that's coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great job.
So once again, it's one of those, like, the difference between what is a sound effect and what is a piece of music is sometimes blurred.
With something like this, you have to be very subtle with it. Otherwise, everybody's going to go, oh, there's the music. And you don't want that. You want to say this is the end of the scene. So.
Yeah. And I think, actually, Jim, this might be one of the lines that I think you hated me the most for, where I was just like, was it flying through space in a ship the shape of a... You just hated saying that line, I remember.
Well, I didn't hate it, but I had some questions when you were writing and we were developing, and I was giving you notes, and yeah.
I think it was just a tongue twister.
Well, there was that, yes. It was kind of a tongue twister, but also I didn't get it. And then you explained it to me, and it was like, you know what? It's they're going to their death, probably. So it makes sense that you would make a coffin reference, or, you know.
Right.
But,
well, and that's the thing is, like, I think the biggest sense that hopefully audience takes away from it is this sense of claustrophobia that it means to be in deep space. Because what I love is the irony that they're in the vastness of the unknown, but they're so tied down to like a lifeboat that it's more cramped than we live in our normal life.
Yeah.
At least we used to live in our normal life.
But Monty, to your credit, and I know it's your birthday, so I'm just not kissing your ass. But to your credit, though, you took a lot of my notes and ideas, and I think Cooper's as well, and you know, addressed them and put them in when needed, or Neil's or anybody's. You were always very open to, you know, little subtle changes, script ideas, anything. But when you felt you wanted to keep something because you believed in it, you said, nope, sorry, I love you, I respect you, but I'm keeping this in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and actually, not to get, we're about to get out of this scene here, but I actually, back to you, Laura, because one of the things that I think you absolutely nail also with Kurt is the subtext of what's going on with the relationship between Ada and Evan, which I think was very difficult because I couldn't write it for you. We had a lot of discussions about what it would be, but I think you did such a good job of having it change throughout the film. And I know that was a beast because we were shooting everything out of order.
Yeah.
So.
And it's definitely one of those things that, but when I would wake up like extra early and dive into the script of what was happening that day and dive into what happened before and what's going to happen the next day. And I put myself in a weird brain timeline. So when I walked into set, I knew exactly hopefully I knew exactly, but I felt a little more prepared to walk in and give Kurt the emotion that I needed for that specific day. So I almost, in my mind, had to understand what would I be feeling if what we shot yesterday wasn't shot yesterday, and you know what we did yesterday we didn't do, and what would I feel right now? What am I feeling today in this moment if this is what's currently happening? It was extra work in the sense of, okay, now I have this underlayered feeling that's happening that isn't really being said to the audience. So I wanted to make sure that they could see that as much as possible without being so over the top with it. I remember you telling me that you were like, okay, we need to have this subtle, but we need to make sure we can see that there's something bothering you. So from there, with getting my timeline correct emotionally, I was able to get that subtlety, hopefully, that you wanted. So that was good. Thank you for telling me that, because I'm wondering that. When I watched it, my parents noticed it. They're like, there's something going on, isn't there? More than what's happening in the film. I go, just you wait.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, that was credit to my wife, too, because it was definitely one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm writing this space adventure, like, disaster film, but there's also, this simmering romance thing right there. I'm like,
Soap opera.
please make sure that this is like coming through in the dialogue, because I wasn't certain. I can't go through like every line, but I feel like there are other moments, like I know for a fact where you're just like, I don't know if Ada would take it that far, or maybe this line's a little. There's one moment actually like way far at the end where I remember you, Laura, was basically like, this wouldn't make sense, and you were 100% correct. So I'm so glad we took it out.
Remember what line it was, Laura?
It actually involves the dream sequence at the end.
Oh wait! Oh my gosh!
Emotional fever pitch.
I remember, but I don't remember the line. I know what you're talking about.
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it when we get there.
We'll get there. Yeah. I'll probably remember.
Yeah, and when Neil, there it is. I see it right now. Your wonderful nanite prop. Tell us about the prop.
That's really
man.
the whole budget right there. It was the whole budget just to create that cell.
I know, right?
It's fully functional too.
Right, exactly. We actually created Life in order to make this movie. No.
Do we want to give away trade secrets of how we created the cell prop?
Wasn't it just a spice container?
Yeah.
It was a toothpick holder.
Oh, that's right.
With I think it was almond milk we ended up using because I like the consistency of it. So filled with almond milk and these tiny little LED bulbs that we found online on Amazon. They look like Christmas lights, but they're fully detachable with tiny little batteries. So we put a few of them in there. And you can see them in the background of some of those shots too, as they're up on the shelf.
Magic of movie making.
And they're actually in the
set and prop department, like everything we could have, just a little bit of.
Well, and I remember
silver spray paint.
Yep, there was a scene, just one shot when Justin was holding the nanite, where the milk didn't quite go to the top. So our effects editor went through frame by frame to like basically crop it up.
Oh, that's right, because it was leaking. They were leaking.
Yeah.
I remember.
It's only like less than 1/10 of a second, but that's how much TLC went into this movie.
Justin picked it up and he was like shaking it. He's like, "Look at the nanite," and it started leaking.
Almond milk everywhere.
Yeah,
but like a 1/10 of a second, that's so many frames.
I'm sure George A. Romero had the same problem on Night of the Living Dead. Rick and Frack make a movie. I will have to say, from my end, this is a really important scene, I think, in the center part of the film, between Mitch and Ada, and then Tomcat coming in, and then eventually Durand. And I have to say, from an editing point of view, I'm not going to lie, I absolutely hated this scene. By that, I mean I hated working on this scene, because it was just one of those things where there was just so much work to be done on the audio mix, because basically, like, it's one of those things that you don't quite realize in writing sometimes, but there's like so much emotion that I feel like in a normal movie, this would cut between like 3 different scenes, like 3 different sets, like 3 different kind of energies, but basically almost like theater, that energy is brought into one set. So it's like this really long scene that I wanted to make sure that it's a lot of talking, there's a lot of lines, and I think that probably took me a good 2 months just on that scene.
Wow.
Yeah. But Tomcat, there you are, and I think...
And then Papa Bear, well done.
Yep. It still makes me cringe watching it. Like...
Yeah.
Being in that moment, and like, this is where I'm going to shout out to Justin. Love working with you and work with you again. And me and him are such like emotional actors where we really get into it. And I remember you slammed that chair, and I was like, "Yes, you slammed that chair," you know, like because it like helped me. You know, I was like, "Yeah, I'm mad at you, you know." But it was so great. Like I remember Monty at one point you're like, "Don't push on that chair so much because it's gonna like I forget what you said, but it's something about like wobbling or pushing over, it's just gonna rock over."
Well, we couldn't afford the deposit on it.
Yeah, you couldn't afford the deposit on the chair.
We spent all the budget on the cell, so
it was cell leak. So
But here's the thing though, I want to talk about also, because I feel like the movie I'm not being like modest here. I think the movie really looks great. And I think a lot of that was owed to, we were very lucky to shoot this on red. And Neil and I went back and forth forever when it came to the colors, the gels, sort of how to create the environment of the spaceship. And I've had a lot of people give feedback that they get a real Firefly vibe from it.
Oh yeah.
Which I think is cool. But it's like a shot like this where it's like that kind of pale green on Ada's face while she's basically sick of Duran. It's just amazing, like all the visual pieces of storytelling that are very subtly layered in there. Like what was that? There was like a slat or something that you put the top part of the set, Neil. They were
like the plastic pallets that I lined with the opal diffusion behind it, and then blasted through the keynotes so we could have like the practical lights in there. And we can get into like the whole color scheme. Every character had their little color scheme in the film, but
yeah, let's talk about it right now.
Rewind for a second though. When Monty first came to me for this, he's like, "We got a super simple idea for a film. We can just shoot it with a couple GoPros around this little space set that we can have." Like, maybe not the GoPros.
That's right. I did say that.
I don't know about simple, but
and that was the fun thing though, was that basically. Because I was thinking found footage. That's why I was originally like GoPros and everything. But what I really love is since the movie takes place in 2050 in a high-priced spaceship, we basically were able to say, well, what would found footage be in the future? And that's why it was okay to pursue something more high-end, like Red camera, which makes the movie look more theatrical. So.
And find that new prosumer look in the future. Because even then, the majority of the film we shot on 3 different kinds of reds, but the majority of it, all the found footage, was shot on the Red 1, that like prototype model that kicked off the whole brand. So even having antiquated high-end technology now to shoot this film on brought it back. So even subconsciously, it's never anything you're going to track while you're watching it, but it just feels new but still outdated at the same time.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Masturbation.
Oh, yeah, so that's me in the corner. If you're watching now. I watched this with my parents when it first came out, premiered. And I remember my mom loved the whole scene, everything. She's like, oh my gosh, something's going to happen. Like, she called it out. But she thought it was going to be this like weird love scene between like angry love sex scene between me and Duran. And instead it turned out to be me alone. And she stood there and her reaction was really cute. She goes, huh. And she wasn't like weirded out by it. She lowered the volume down a little bit. She's like, I don't need to hear that. But she went, you're alone. And I go, yeah, I'm alone.
Yeah.
Monty? How to explain that scene to your mother?
Oh yeah. So my mother's seen that scene too. I'm so glad that it exists, and it will always exist. No, but that's interesting. Once again, to Neil's credit, because we had a long discussion about how we wanted to shoot that scene, and Neil made the really good choice because we basically narrowed it down between 2 shots. The idea of doing it as a close up on her face. And your much better idea of shooting it from the angle of Duran's chair. So that to me is artistically the whole point of that scene, is the fact that you see his empty chair with her in the background. And it's really just the audio then. So, yeah.
And it gives you that weird, okay, I'm in this small space, and all these emotional things are happening and occurring, and somebody can be left still so alone, even though they're in this confined space with multiple people.
And the fact that you're always kind of exposed in this incredibly artificial environment.
Yeah.
So here we get the big kind of second act turn that happens in terms of the competing space program, the Chinese. Oh God. Did you guys come up with what buttons to push to do things? Like, because it's always like really like Michael is shaking his head. No.
I bet if you looked at all the raw footage, every single time was probably something different. So good luck with the editing there. Yeah.
For
I
me,
was just-
it was the same switch every time.
The same
And so
switch did everything.
It did everything, no matter what it was. Flip that. Flip. Okay, same switch.
Exactly. When Michael and I were in the cockpit, I was just having fun playing with switches. What does this do? What does this do? Oh, we.
Destruct? Sure.
I was hoping for one of this, like one day, like we flip the switches and they make noises. You know, I'm like, what makes a noise?
Had I known that, we could have rigged something.
Yeah, but a lot of times there was no switch. I was just reaching up and pretending to.
Oh yeah. Over
Oh,
the
yeah.
overhead stuff, there was nothing
Because
there.
Neil at one point told me, said, "Don't look down for the switches. Look up because you lose your whatever
Face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was when we were in Monty's bedroom, and I remember just going, "Okay, click, 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 click." I didn't even know what it was doing.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
Actually, before we get too far, I don't want to lose it. Excellent piece of character detail from you, Michael, with the gum.
Oh yeah. I'm glad you kept the line, and I didn't think it was going to stay. I'm like, oh, it's there. That makes me happy.
Well, it's a perfect button at the end of the scene. Who the hell has my gum?
Right.
That was an improv from Mr. Michael Kruger.
Well,
right?
of interest is that I actually purchased Trident gum because that is what the NASA space program used.
Oh.
Love that.
Method, folks. Method.
Who knew?
There you go. Yeah.
Monty.
So, yes.
I want to ask about the French here.
Oh yeah, the French. I think everybody did great with the French. See, the funny thing is, let me talk a little bit about why one of the characters is French in the film. There's really no other reason behind it other than the fact that I wanted to imply that it was an international crew. I really wanted to sell that idea. However, it was one of those things where, since we were a low-budget film, a lot of it was based off of the talent that was willing to take this journey with me. So it was one of those things that's like, I decided on French, and thank you all, decided on French really early on without really knowing if it was going to be a problem or not. It was just sort of like, here we go. But, well, I mean, one of the things that I hate, one of my biggest pet peeves in films usually is when a character will say a line in another language, whatever it is, and the character will answer in English. I'm like, why would you do that? And it happens like so often. I think that happened in Cloverfield Paradox, and it drove me crazy. So with this is one of those things that like I really love that everybody was willing to do their scenes back and forth in French, which meant going sometimes for like a minute solid in another language. And I think everybody brought their A game with that.
Yeah, very cool.
Oh, and
It's
this,
authentic.
Michael, Jim, we definitely have to talk about this because this is actually a scene that we rehearsed before we shot the movie. And this is actually a little bit of background knowledge here. This is the longest uncut shot in the film. Is the two shot.
Yeah, Jim Hilton.
What?
Longest uncut shot.
I know. I didn't realize.
The ongoing joke for me when I was watching this, again, I'm going to bring up my parents again, because my mom loved seeing you guys eating this granola. Like every time. She goes, there's that granola. And did you guys, my question for you guys, because there's some points I wasn't on here, like obviously here, you guys shot this separate. I wasn't there. I was away in another room. Did you guys ever run out of granola and just kind of toss things, or were people still putting granola in there?
Jim doesn't. You don't actually eat any of it, I don't think. Jim.
I never actually ate any of the granola because I didn't really know what it was.
I did.
I thought the budget was so small that maybe I'm eating sand or rocks or something. But Michael was eating it like crazy, and I was pretending to eat it.
He could be eating sand or rock.
No,
Michael was
because
a sand or rock.
the thing is, 95% of actors cannot fake chew. It's the truth.
It's the truth. I agree with that.
So just do it.
That makes sense.
You can't. No. I hate in movies when people are pretending to drink and you know they're not drinking.
It's totally like the cup is empty. Yeah.
Or pretending to eat and you know they're not eating. So it's always a giveaway for me.
Or where it clearly looks like, cranberry juice and not wine.
Well,
Actually, another interesting thing about that particular scene is when Michael and Jim cross the middle line to like clink their bags together, there's actually another hidden cut in there that nobody will know about until I say it. And this was based off of Neil's eye, where he actually noticed that there was a shadow that would cross in front of the red gel, I think it was.
It was more based on my OCD, let's say, than my because there was a little shadow in the back console. We actually did a little VFX map out there, I think a little power window to remove it, so it cloned the frame before the shadow to cover that shadow there. Just because
cool.
We wanted the audience's eyes just on you two, and just any movement in the background would have felt artificial and just draw your eye away from that. So they're just with you the whole time.
Neil, now I want to see the shadow. So now you gotta put it back in.
You never will. The director's cut with shadow.
We got Ada and Phil drama here, folks. Come on now.
Oh man, I actually really love how both of you play this. This might be one of the harshest smackdowns.
Oh, it is.
But
my husband was helping me learn these lines prior to shooting, of course, and he had unkind words about Ada in this scene. So I'll leave it at that.
I want to say, Michael, you did such a good job in the scene watching it. I'm like, your reaction is just priceless. I was like, I didn't even do it justice. Like, it's all you in this scene.
Nonsense.
Like,
no, it was a good scene.
See it. Look at your face right now. Look at.
Well, it's harsh, man. What she does in this scene is nasty. I mean,
we also had I remember a lot of discussions about Michael, we had a lot of discussions about what it was that you were wanting from Ada, and also, vice versa and everything. And I think the biggest, if I were to talk about kind of the extended themes of the film, is it's not just spaces in outer space, but it's the space between people, what they can communicate and not communicate. And I feel like this scene is really indicative of that. It's like there's a reason that there's so much negative space in the shots with characters. It's like the divider between them. There's like a bunch, we see a lot of the console. It's not just to show off our awesome set that we were able to get, although that was part of it. But I'll tell you the other thing I really hated, though, that did not know, kind of the unforeseen thing we were filming, was the furniture store above the set.
Yes!
Really?
So it was not a sound stage. There was some bleed from a furniture store that was above our set.
Yep.
But you can't hear it in the film. I think there's literally only one time in the mix where you can hear a.
But it worked. It kind of worked into this like weird ethereal kind of space sound of
yeah. Right.
Oh, that's
Exactly.
Something moving above the ship.
Now, I have to talk a little bit. Well, let's all talk a little bit about this scene right here, because I think this was scene 22, 23. I think that's what it was. This scene was an absolute beast. And I think every single one of us hated filming it. And also, we're thrilled to film it, the challenge of it, for various reasons. I will say, for the cockpit stuff, when it comes to the close-up on Michael, this I remember, and you'll attest to this as well, Neil. I think we only shot it twice, and Michael went through every single one of his lines before he goes into the laboratory area. And I mean every single one of his lines.
I do recall after we did the first one, and it was because we're doing the shaking thing.
Yep.
I remember you did the second. You're like, we're gonna do it again. I remember specifically saying, Monty, that's it. I can do one more. That's it. I can't do it again. And
yeah,
you didn't have to.
So let's all talk about the shaking for a second, guys. How was that fun?
Michael has the best shaking in the movie. I will say.
This is terrible. I will try and be proper, but I was watching it after I saw it, and I'm like, okay, it looks like I'm doing what Ada does earlier in the film. That's what it looks like when my shaking, and I hate it. It looks like I'm pleasuring myself.
But I kept telling people, I'm like, we will be able to shake the frame in post, so it won't look, and it does. Like, the thing is about this sequence, I think it looks amazing, and there's so many different little techniques that went into making it work. like now we can talk a little bit about the costumes of the spaceship helmet, the space suits. I think everybody hated the helmets, or filming with the helmets. The helmets look great.
I never had to wear one.
Oh, that's right. You never. We have a funny story actually, Neil, about Michael's helmet later on because we used that in a different way. Remember?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was one of those things I do remember. The problem with the helmets is that we weren't able to cushion them on the inside to fit everybody's head. So the moment that we would get one person situated to go to the next person, the helmet would slide to the side. And then everything would go out of whack. So we would like get one person all set up, and then we'd have to go back and deal with another person.
That was a nightmare.
See, look, I'm sorry. Look at the shaking. It's not appropriate.
Okay, I'm going to look.
And you're still chewing your gum. You're still got it.
Well,
Get my gum.
Now, Neil, what coming up here, actually, when one of the things that I really love that goes to the found footage was a technique that you used in camera. What was it called again?
So in photography, more than cinematography, they call it lens whacking, where you'll actually detach the lens from the bottom of the camera. So we held it right against there, so you still have the basic field of view, and then at the pivotal moment, just remove it from the camera to give you this effect that you're about to see. Where it just like diffracts and...
Yep, the moment that Justin fell, yeah, and it goes out of focus, that's literally the lens physically being taken off of the camera.
Cool.
Through it as it's changing.
How cool.
You're holding it there.
There we go.
Well, this fall, it makes me laugh every time. I feel like it's like a Corey Matthews from like, you know that, what's that? Oh, Boy Meets World, like a Corey Matthews fall. Yeah. It's like...
all the sweat looked great. That was definitely true.
You're going to have to let me talk about this crap that I had to inhale in this next sequence because what a pain in the ass.
Go for it right now. This is your moment. This is your moment to talk about.
It's coming up, and whatever I remember literally gagging, not fake gagging, but gagging for whatever I had to inhale. This, I don't know, it's coming up in a little while. I'm too early.
Well, it's okay. Here's the funny thing about that crap. Well, two things I'll say. One, I do remember that the helmet dialogue was something that we had to ADR later, which I'm so glad that we were able to get into a studio and do that. Because Michael's stuff was clean, but Justin and Laura's stuff was a bit... but I will say the crap that you're about to inhale, Michael, that crap was on the set of Blade Runner 2049.
Really? Yeah.
Yes, that's the same crap that Ryan...
I probably still have some inside my lungs. That's good.
Yeah, that you shared that. It's like you and Ryan Gosling were kissing.
Oh my God. Let's go back to the earlier sequence then. We'll be clear on that. Yeah.
Kiss Ryan Gosling.
How actually now?
And I'm not even gay, but I want to kiss him.
That was there it is.
Here it comes. Yeah. Right here.
Yeah.
I think I'm out of sync. I'm out of sync with the video, so.
Yeah, that's crap. I remember literally gagging as I fell to the floor. That stuff was gnarly.
Yeah. And I do like the choice where we just take out all the audio entirely. There's one shot where there's only one shot in the film where Jim is in his helmet, and that was in that scene.
Well, thank God, because I could not wear.
Girl,
I was Michael just said he never ever had to wear the helmet.
No.
And I could not. I had to wear it for 5 seconds, and it drove me crazy.
Yeah,
that was a constant bitching.
I'm very claustrophobic. And Kurt and Justin and Laura were able to sit there between takes and just wear these helmets. And I said, how do you do that? How do you do that? I can't do it.
Well, me and Kurt
is Mr. Zen. He just goes, I just meditate.
No, to be honest, I will tell you, without anyone seeing, me and Kurt would pop the screen out and get fresh air. And try to refix it.
Clever.
Because otherwise it would fog up too. Like there were times like I was like, okay, Laura's foggy, and I'd have to take it off, put it back on. So instead of having to do that, I would just pop it, and it saved us so much time after that. But
I remember sitting off to the side, and like I never had to wear the thing, and just watching the three of you in the main space of the ship, and you could sense the misery. Like it was the looks on your face, you were so angry. But I mean, you were professional, you went through, but it's like you could feel the the hatred. Yeah.
But again, I remember the demoralizing moment too, where like we, because we kept on changing the angle, we'd have to fly away those walls and then change the camera angle. I remember like doing it maybe 2-3 passes from the one angle, and then be like, "All right, second angle, guys." Yep.
I know you felt so bad. You would apologize to us. Neil was like, I'm sorry, but you have to put the helmet on again.
No, I mean, once again, whatever we could to help out, but man, it was just so warm in there.
Yeah. I'm happy that I only had to wear that for like literally 5 seconds when I ran into the room to rescue Justin, or what was his name?
Yeah, no, it's Mitch's character. Yeah.
Yeah, Mitch a bitch. Yeah.
And not Phil.
I just couldn't do it. I'm sorry. Yeah. But
great sound design here.
Oh yeah, that's my cameo, guys. That's my cameo in the movie.
Lovely.
What was it? What did I miss?
Bong Wei Yisa, the
Chinese, from earlier.
That's me.
Michael's Chinese.
But what's interesting? So going back, actually, Cooper, to the construction of the script, I remember distinctly when I was first writing it. This was the point where I was basically like, "Hey, I got half of this movie, and I don't know what they're supposed to do once they get in the escape pods. I don't like. I was literally like, I didn't know the ending. I didn't know. I was like."
It was definitely. I watch a lot of nature documentaries, so the thing about the penguins is something that I had learned a little earlier there. And I was like, oh well, they're just trying to survive in deep space. They're going to have to connect. They're going to have to, and then from there, I was like, well, we can. If space is limited, again, space, we can put into a mindscape near the end. So that was something that we both talked about. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my solution.
That was also goes back to the original inspiration for it, because there's a 1960s Japanese comic by Osamu Tezuka, which has a similar setup with characters in deep space that are in escape pods. In the comic, they're only able to talk through radio communication and not visually. But what I always thought was so amazing about this comic, and Cooper was the one that showed it to me, what we both really loved about it, is that you could look at the panels in any order that you wanted to at certain points. It's like they're all in their individual escape pods, and you can sort of look at everybody's reaction.
So the comic is like very formally experimental. And the way it is kind of like a grid where everyone in the pod has a side on the page. And then if you look at it either vertically or horizontally, you can read them in whatever order. And it's very fascinating. I remember Monty, you were like, I really want to recreate that in some way in cinema.
And this was basically finally the opportunity, where it's like the whole split screen idea. And that was ultimately the biggest test. It was like, so for I think it's about 38 minutes in the final film. It's like, how do we make the audience look at split screen like 38 minutes and be riveted? And I think that we made it work. And it all came down to performance. And then it came down to, because what you're looking at right now, the whole like rest of this film, basically, we shot in my bedroom, in my apartment.
I'm sitting right next to his nice king-size bed where the kitty is laying right next to me.
Exactly, and she's supposed to break down in tears because she's going to die in deep space and create. It was just like this huge mental like thing. But what I think is really interesting, Cooper?
I don't know if you were getting to this, but so much of the tension here has to do with the sound design. We're going to talk about...
Yeah, I mean, when it came to the sound design, we were very lucky, actually, to have access to some royalty-free sounds via Lucasfilm, actually. So we took advantage of that, and also like static things. I don't think we actually Foleyed anything from the film. It was all built off of like some pre-existing sounds, the background noises, and the other important thing I remember with the film was, since we were looking at the same setup of actors looking into the camera, like, shoulder up, we had to pay a great deal of attention to what we were going to do with the lighting to differentiate it. So this goes back to the whole color scheme idea. Neil, you want to talk a little bit about how we approached that?
Sure. So we tried to work out a good visual demarcation for all the characters early on, and that's on the Udo, and now more cleanly seen here in all the escape pods, so that I think it started, we wanted complementary colors between Ada and Durand, just to kind of show their balance there. So giving him the purple, giving her the yellow, there are colors that just complement each other there, and then make that tertiary, giving the green to Mitch, the bitch, to make him the outlier there. So it was kind of like this, not a love triangle, but the dynamic between the three of them drives the real personal angle of the film. And then on the other ends, as the leader, we gave white to Michael, just to kind of be the shining light, the all-encompassing, because he is like, they were all underneath his roof.
Boom.
And then for Jim, for Tomcat, just giving him that cool, I think it was Midnight Blue was the gel that we used for him, just to give this like the calm, cool, collected kind of wisdom behind that blue there.
Yep.
So
yeah.
Here, each one of them has their own color palette. It's lit the same on one side, but then just accented there by their character color there.
By the way, the Udo logo is the coolest thing on Earth. or elsewhere.
Agreed.
Awesome.
That one?
Yeah, the elder sign. Yeah, that is a Cthulhu reference. If anybody's wondering about that, which it's an interesting little, once again, Easter egg or connection or what have you. Later in the film, there is a part where Ada talks about tardigrades being the basis for the nanite technology, and tardigrades are the only species on Earth that can survive in space that we currently know of. And so that symbol of the Cthulhu elder gods being these like monsters that came from the deep was sort of the connection of like they're literally harnessing an ancient creature to further human technology. And so that was just, once again, little details in the background in terms of the world building. I mean, going back to the very beginning of the film, the whole like Bright Star thing with the news telecast. I mean, that's going back to the very first scene. But like the whole idea that Bright Star is sort of this all-encompassing company in the future that has their hands in space technology, that has their hands in bio research. They're a big, big pharma, big kind of, it's definitely an allusion to all of that, of kind of like a soft tyranny that sort of the future is kind of devolving into because resources are becoming more scarce. Ada has that line about like, don't say we didn't fuck the earth. So that's like all the little like background building, world building of the movie that's very like vaguely hinted at, but it is there. So I really liked that because one of my favorite comic books of all time is Judge Dredd, which is very much about like a future that has given way to fascism, but nobody that's in the system really understands how fascistic they really are. Kind of similar with like Starship Troopers. Not that it's as overt in this movie, but I think that there's a slight dystopian nature to the film. So, okay.
A lot of stuff of the news ticker at the beginning has all sorts of like apocalyptic things there, and I love that detail.
Oh yeah, it's all catastrophes, like nobody getting vaccinations and things like that. Yeah. So Laura, I think probably one of my favorite pieces of performance from you was in this scene when you are waiting to hear from Durand, and the camera's just on you, and you have to like break down in tears. There's several scenes in this part of the movie where you had to do that. Yeah. Was that easy?
It's so interesting because even when I watch, it's so weird. That happens to me all the time. I don't know if people realize it. The more people are with me when I watch my stuff, they'll probably see it. Whenever I see myself cry, I start to cry. And I think it's because I remember what I had to think about, or certain things I had to think about when I made that scene and made that happen. It like makes me emotional to see myself in that state. And with this kitty next to me and this beautiful king size bed and the fan and the cat doing, and this goes with any project I work on. This was with Meisner technique. That's one of the main techniques that I work with. And I dive deep into one, how my character is feeling in this moment, where I am at in this moment, how I'm feeling, and then pull a little bit from what has happened also in my life currently that can relate to Ada, and pull that in as well, and pull from an emotion deep inside me that is a real deep emotion that I went through that relates to Ada and what she is currently going through. And I had mentioned to you, Monty, a little bit that the certain things that Ada goes through, which you guys will see later on in the movie, I personally somewhat had to deal with in my life. And so that emotion I pulled from a few years ago and brought that to these scenes later on in the movie. So you're really getting how I really feel for this character and for myself. And I brought that through to this. So it is difficult. But when you know how to monitor your emotions and work on it a little bit, you can step away from it and be okay. I definitely had a lot of headaches after that day, for sure, and just went home and had some good food, and it went away. And you give yourself that time to relax. But yeah, it's definitely straining to go in and out of that and know that you guys are going to only be looking here, and I can't just not be there. I got to give you guys as much as I can. And that definitely is where it gets difficult, because it's not, no one wants to go through that over and over again every day, but that's my job.
Yeah, and I think that was going into all the escape pod stuff in general. I think probably one of the things that, to be honest, in hindsight, was one of my biggest terrors, was creating for an extended period of time the stakes. Whereas basically, like, everybody's terrified that they're going to lose hull integrity, that they're going to die, that there's like, they're hyperventilating, that they're going, but I'm like, this is the only frame I get to play with that in. Because
Right.
when we were working on the film, we weren't even certain if we were going to have any kind of CG. There isn't a lot in the film, but anything to cut to, basically, outside of the actors. So it was basically like you had to sustain terror for an extended period of time with the camera rolling. In a way, it's like a continuous shot, only it's, stationary. So it's not too dissimilar, I think, from approaching something like 1917 or something.
Yeah.
And so I was really impressed with that. There were like periods where the actors would just keep going in the camera, especially like early on when you're first in the escape pod. I remember, Laura, you doing a couple of takes of you having to pull the helmet off. And I actually, what's interesting in the editing, I think we did like 2 or 3 takes, and I literally cut to all of them in the editing. I had the power to do that through the glitching and doing the color corrections. So like every single take that you gave me in that moment is in the movie.
Love it.
Which is fun.
Clever. Clever.
But yeah, it's interesting because it was just one of those things where, sorry guys for a second here, the other thing that I think the audience should realize is that when we filmed this, none of the actors acted opposite each other. They only acted opposite the camera. So it's interesting, like the person who was reading the lines was me. Like you were acting with me, and not really, you had no idea how the other actor was really going to react to it. We didn't have any playback.
And I will say, like, watching the film for the first time, I was, speaking of that, like, I had no idea how the other ones, how they shot I think even Duran, Kurt was there the same day that I shot. And he came later, but I could have stayed and watched, but I think I ended up leaving. And I think I wanted it to be a surprise for myself. And when I saw the film, I'm like, wow, it works. It's there.
It's pretty seamless. Like when I first saw it, like knowing that you guys, because I wasn't part of this sequence of filming, but watching it and knowing you guys did it separate, I was impressed as hell because everything seemed to line up reaction-wise. Like it was, I guess, kind of kismet because you couldn't have planned 100% for that, obviously, with not everyone on set. But the fact that it worked, I think, is a heck of an achievement.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah,
and that goes with people, going back to what Monty said about people wanting to go through this process. Again, like it's low budget. Certain things had to happen the way they did because of that. And people had to be willing to make that leap and make that sacrifice. Like, oh, I hope it works. I hope it goes well. And I think that's the beauty of low budget is when it does work out and it does look good and you get this beautiful scene and you're like, oh, wow, like we did that. Awesome. That's so cool. Yeah. And that's this moment here, I think, for us.
yeah, and that's the thing is like I knew, 90% knew that it was going to work. I was always like, there was actually in pre-production some testing I did where I filmed you, Lauren, filmed you, Jim, at a reading, just doing like a couple of pages of it.
Yeah.
And I actually did a dry run editing that and sort of, where you guys were not acting against each other, but intercutting it with that. So I knew that the technique would work. I just wasn't sure if it was going to be able to work for such an extended period of time in the script. Basically the whole middle act of the film, at least. And so I was like, but I knew, that's the thing is I knew if it worked, it was going to be the thing that everybody remembered about the film. Like once anybody sees the film, they'll be like, oh, this is the movie where it's the ultimate nightmare Zoom call, basically. Like that's, I think, how people are going to remember it.
That's not
Interesting how advantageous it was. Like not everyone was using Zoom when we envisioned this.
Yeah.
And so it lined up so amazingly.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but
I do want to give a shout out to everyone watching. I apologize for the continuity of my hair on a lot of this and my bangs. Due to low budget, I was my own makeup artist, my own hairstylist. And I will say there were so times, even Neil would call me out. He goes, was that hair in front of your face or behind your ear? Was it the other piece of hair? Was it both pieces of hair? We don't know. Let's just reshoot it. And sometimes it just didn't work. So if you notice and you're like looking at me, you're like, oh, this girl has her hair, the continuity of her hair is so off. It's because I'm sorry, there's only so many things I could do, and I just wanted to get the emotion there. So.
Now,
Jim,
whatever
lovely
you
singing,
can.
by the way.
What?
Lovely singing, Jim.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the campfire scene. There's a lot of little things and macro things. I mean, I absolutely love the movie. I will say, not that I ever play favorites, but I think the campfire scene is one of my, up to this point, favorite things I've ever directed.
It's beautiful.
For a lot of different reasons, and they're all absolutely owed to everybody. So the great thing about this scene is that we have all of our actors here. We had a location that was out in Joshua Tree. We were shooting with one of the other Red cameras. Which one was it, Neil?
This is the Gemini with the dual ISO, which is really great for the night sensitivity.
Yeah. And so like when we're shooting up at the stars, like that was that camera just being able to pick up the light of the stars. And
That's great.
And then Dan Mac, the music, which came, a lot later into it, I think is pretty amazing. And that was based off of something that we did on set, which was Jim's idea of The Beautiful Dreamer.
That's a beautiful idea, Jim. Really was.
Hey,
Tomcat's character that's his wife's favorite song. And well, what we find out about his wife later on in the movie is that he loves Forever. So I had to use Beautiful Dreamer all the way through that because it's so obvious and it's so beautiful.
Yeah, and I love what you did with it on the soundtrack, that you kind of extended that theme through that campfire scene, and it was kind of ethereal. It was a little, maybe you went to the minor chord or whatever, but you kept that theme going, which I thought was brilliant on your part. Monty originally wanted to use like the weight, I think. Or no, that was for the Bob Dylan thing. Never mind. Anyway, we decided to use Monty, or I came up with Beautiful Dreamer because, first of all, it's what do you call
Public
it?
domain. Yeah.
Public. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's free. It's public domain, and it's a beautiful song, and it works perfectly with the dreams that they all have of going into space and so anyway, to your credit, Mac, you extended that theme that I started in the campfire and drew it out, and it was beautiful. Good work, man.
And to Michael's credit, this beard is epic in this scene.
Yeah.
No, I was saying earlier, it's like it looks like it's fake, but when you're growing it, you don't realize it. But when I first saw the cut, I'm like, oh my God, that looks fantastic.
And I will say, I want this scene from our reel, by the way.
Oh, heck yeah. No, Laura, when we shot this, I legit was like, this is going to be really, really powerful. And I think it turned out beautifully. I think
it's a beautiful, and honestly, still to this, I watch it, and I've had a few friends watch it, and I see their reaction, and they turn and they say, "Are both you guys drunk?" Like they really thought we drank that day. So good on us.
Good for you.
Yeah, all day. It's the same thing. Right?
I did.
Well, and the other thing, there was something that was like 11th hour magic that I think happened with this scene, because just to talk to you about kind of the logistics that we all remember of having to make an independent film work, is we were shooting this on location and we couldn't get our generator to work for 2 days because Neil and I actually we were up there the day before shooting some B-roll and everything.
Shouting
and
out
one of those things. Yeah, and it was we knew we couldn't create the campfire because there's not actually a campfire in the movie. This is all lighting.
By the way, I want to interject. I did not get credit for moving split film.
Working out
for the fire. This is me. That movement right there, that's me, and I want credit.
You brought the fire.
You did so good too. You're a perfect fire.
Credit to you now, sir.
But thankfully, just as if by magic, we were able to get the generator ready right before we were to shoot it. And that's the thing, is that we were shooting out there, we were low budget. We didn't have trailers for the actors or anything. We did the light that's in the film was the light that we also saw out in the middle of the desert in the dark. So we were, basically going in it like soldiers in combat. And I think it was absolutely amazing. I could literally feel everybody being just perfect. And that was the thing that was sending goosebumps down my spine. I was like Michael, when he does his close-up where he talks to camera in the scene, he nailed it perfectly in the first take. I almost didn't want a second one. We got a second one. That was literally our first setup, which took hours to get to that point. And I was like, wow. And that just set the tone for the whole rest of that scene. And everybody was just hitting it, nailing it. And
it was that awesome food you brought us that night. Because
yes.
We ate, I think, before we started shooting.
I loved the grilling that under the tent there. It was so damn windy. That was a really lovely connective moment for everybody. Eating those hot dogs, the potato salad. I think it was after we shot, or maybe it was.
I don't know. I don't know.
It was a lovely moment of community. I really liked that night.
Yeah, it was nice. And then for everyone watching, we actually camped out, didn't we?
Yes.
And then we had the hotel as an option.
We had a motel.
We,
Oh, yeah.
Jim and I shared a room. Hell no, I'm not sleeping out in the desert.
Oh man,
If
that
you want
was
to put behind the scenes story.
And I will
Oh,
never
yes.
tell. I will
Yeah.
never tell what happened that night.
well, actually no. Neil has a pretty awesome behind-the-scenes story about that. Go for it, Neil.
So we shot half of the daytime exteriors earlier in Joshua Tree, the team building stuff, and then we came back to the camp, which is privately owned. We had our tent set up and everything because Monty, one of the other producers, myself, we were camping out there to set up for the night exteriors. As we come back, I'm like, where's my tent? We had this huge windstorm rip through earlier in the day that just completely picked up and threw my tent, never to be found to this day.
Oh no!
As I'm trying to wrap my head around, all right, so how are we going to shoot this night scene? I need to eat at some point. I need water. Where's my home? Where's my home?
That was one of many, because there was also one of those things that since we didn't have a generator, what was crazy was that we were shooting a lot of the stuff earlier on in the morning without any way to replenish our batteries. But we knew we had to go for 2 days in Joshua Tree. So I remember, like, when we got access to the motel.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I had gotten an extra room, and I was like, everyone put the equipment in the room.
Yep, we were charging, like, we found every single outlet we could to plug it into.
And the hotel manager was very sketchy about what we were doing. If you'll
Yes, he was.
Yes, the good old stories.
He was
there.
like, "How many people are staying? How many people in each room?"
But yeah, so then we get into the second. Basically, I like to think of the escape pod sequences as the first sequence before the flashback, and then the second part here, where we start to get into basically the third act, the climax. We're getting up to it right here, and sort of. I think this is where the acting was like really ramped up to 11 in terms of. I love all the little moments like here where like. You guys started to just talk over each other. Once again, we were filming everybody separately, but I think it's like, there's a moment in the film that I absolutely love where Kurt actually says, "Mitch, are you reading this?" And Justin actually looks over to the side of the frame where Kurt is in. And that was an absolutely happy accident where I was like, if I cut the split screen that way, it literally looks like Justin's looking at him, even though he's not there. So just little things like that were just like, we were really, so lucky and blessed the whole time. To get all of those little moments. And
it's kind of like your quarantine movie, which everyone should watch.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
It's a relationship.
Wait, is this me coming in here shortly?
Yeah. Here we go with the makeup.
The makeup was fantastic. God, I forgot Sierra, right?
Yes, Sierra Barden. Let's talk about the makeup. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty much a hoot. But the thing that was interesting to me was, because I did this while we were still at Fonco, my sequence is coming up, and I didn't get a lot of direction from you, not because you didn't give it, but just, but kind of I went with what I went with, and it was kind of a transcendental acting moment for me. Like I kind of got lost in there. I mean, you don't see much of it here, but it was very unnerving when I got done. Yeah.
You're creepy. It's a very spooky moment, man.
It was creepo, yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because once again, because of logistics and our access to our makeup designer and the application and all of that, the actual scenes in the escape pods, even though all of the escape pods were filmed in my apartment, the few shots that involved makeup were shot at Fonco Studios. So yes, Michael's scene where he appears in his makeup was filmed at Fonco. And then Justin's scene moment when he appears in makeup. And that one was an interesting trick because we had to match that with also filming in the bedroom. And I think it matches perfectly.
And we had to kind of set the look for all the escape pods on the fly to shoot those makeup moments, which is really tough. Because we had a vague idea of how to do it, but it was more like on the day, like, how can we duplicate this thing in your apartment, in your bedroom there?
And I remember, like, Justin's scenes. I remember we were done shooting for that day at Fonco, and it was like, Monty was like, "Hey, Justin, we need to shoot this thing." I think Justin had to leave earlier, or like he couldn't stay the next day or something like that. And so you had offered to do his scenes at Fonco. And I remember you're like, just pulled one of the space chairs over, and you're like, "Sit here, let's shoot here." And I'm like getting dressed and watching Justin like just plop in his chair and start doing his scenes like out of nowhere on the side of the set. And it was kind of cool, you know. It's like, all right, here we go.
Yeah, let's
the other day.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that was so fascinating about making the movie, was that there were so many scenes that were pre-planned and just like they felt very much like, oh, this must be like a Stanley Kubrick set. And then there were so many other scenes that is like, this is how you make a low budget film. Get over here, shoot this, put up the lights, say your lines, we're done.
Yeah.
And
good actors for that, because it would not work without those performances.
that's the thing that, like, I've said this before, and I think it's totally true, is that like I don't feel like I gave you guys direction. I feel like all I did was just direct around you so that you were able to, you know, so I was able to keep the movie going. But I feel like all of the amazing stuff that you brought to it in the performances, like, I can't take credit for any of that.
No, because I mean, there's a lot. We had a lot of pre-discussions about who Phil was and where he was coming from. So
Right.
that, I mean, that wasn't me saying this and this is it, Monty. This is how I'm doing it. No, we discussed it. We figured out what would be the best option for how we both saw it, and that's what came out. So
Yeah.
don't
And
sell
same
yourself
with me.
short.
Yeah, and same with me, Monty. Like you really like. I remember it was a good, I want to say 6 months to a year before we started filming, where we like started talking about the characters, and you were telling us about, okay, I got this script, I got these characters, I see you guys as these characters, and so we were able to take that whole time to dive in with you and ask as much as we could.
Right.
Given, and obviously when you get on set, certain things come up maybe and you have more questions, but we really did try. I know with the rehearsals that we did and the discussions that we had with you, to dive in as much as we could way before we got on set. So it made it a lot easier. I feel like a lot of projects don't have that time. They don't have that capability to do that nowadays. And
Yeah.
you worked out.
And I think that that's just comes from a place of knowing, and I think that it's a good tip for any directors working maybe in any kind of film, but I think definitely an independent film, is that like if you find a moment to sit down with your actors, or just even like an email, be like, ask whatever question you want, be it how long your hair should be, whether or not you should be chewing gum, down to like what is motivation, you know, what is backstory. Directors should not shy away from answering those questions and answering all of those questions, because they're never going to get answered on set. There's just too much else going on, and too much, like the engine is going at that point. So it's true. I think that level of prep that we had going into it made all the difference. I think we're getting up to, yeah.
Monty, we had plenty of time on set because all that time I spent in my trailer.
Hey, you had a trailer?
Oh my gosh! I will
Twizzlers,
say,
Dasani.
Trailer?
I will say some of my favorite memories was in that dressing room with you and the boys. Like, it was just so much fun, like hanging out there and waiting for the set to be ready, and we're like in our character already, and it was just really fun. Like,
Do I have time to tell a quick story, Monty,
And
about Mitch?
Too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Well, when I
I
first read the script for Monty, just to give feedback and notes, I had no knowledge that I'd be a part of it, but I said, "Oh my God, Monty, I really like Mitch the bitch." I said, "So if you move ahead, you know," and he's like, "Oh, I've offered it to Justin." I'm like, "Oh," but then nothing happened. I'm like, "Okay, whatever." And Susan and Monty and Elwood and I are all having dinner. And I said, "Have you cast Phil yet?" He's like, "Well, no." I'm like, so anyway, I got the part. Yay.
Well, and I mean, and everybody did an amazing job with it. I think we're getting into, so we're getting into the final part here where we really started to have a lot of fun with the colors.
and a lot of fun with the hair continuity.
Yeah.
With the hair continuity and the blood.
And the blood.
Getting kind of the scrapes and everything. And I think once again, you guys just absolutely nailed creating the reality of, okay, his legs are broken, okay, she's disoriented, like just all of that time, you know, the heavy breathing and kind of all of that. This I like to think of this final part of the film as going full Argento, full Suspiria. And I remember, Neil,
Something you watching.
it's true. We had an interesting discussion about, basically, you talked about the concept of taking away light.
Right. So like pretty much as the pods power down, we're slowly degrading the look of it. So I think we just had like a few elements of it was formerly white light on the side as their key light there, turning that red just for, you know, the emergency systems coming in, and then slowly taking away all the different elements. Like the blinking in the background is one of the last things to go. Basically just have like a little crescent light on them by the end.
Yeah.
Also with their mental state, as that starts to degrade and kind of dematerialize, everything else around them just slowly gets crushed down and blacked out there.
Absolutely. And that was super fun. I mean, really, like, there isn't much more that I can add commentary for this moment other than, like, this is when you start to get, I think, into that sort of Zen moment where, like, everybody, you know, you were creating the emotions, we were letting the cameras roll. I remember, Laura, that when you would be, like, saying the lines where it's just like, you know, only 10 days and we'll be in paradise and blah, blah, blah. Like, I felt like every time I had to feed you one of Duran's lines, I just was like, whispering as quiet as I
You were. It was really funny. I remember that. Because I think at one point, you even stopped. You were like saying it, but like mouthing it, because you were like, I think she knows.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
you didn't want to interrupt or something. It was really cute. You're just like.
I also have to interject one other funny story. Like, I remember, though, when we were going to do the escape pod stuff, having a moment where, once again, independent filmmaking, I didn't realize that a red camera could get so filled with gunge that it stopped working.
Oh yeah, well the red one at least, again.
The red one, yeah.
Save the real good guns for the certain sequences, but
yeah, it got.
And then also rewinded a second, when we would do the shake cam on the Udo, if you would shake it too much, you'd start dropping frames. So we couldn't overshake it because it would basically overheat and start dropping frames in the middle of what we're shooting there.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it was that's the thing that I loved so much about the logistics, where it's like, everybody be real intense, but don't be too intense or the whole system will collapse. The camera will stop working, the chairs will fall apart, the face plates will fall off, but be intense.
And then there's the idea of our spatial awareness, right? There's space again, like be intense in certain space.
Yes.
Within confines. Yeah.
So once again, actually, Cooper, as you were mentioning before, talking about the sound design, I know we're not quite there yet, but this, I think, in the final part was where it was like really important. It's a little subtle thing if the audience catches it or not, but so there's a part that's coming up, because now we're getting into the day 1, day 2, when it like goes to white, which is another little Easter egg of the fact that it goes from the black cards doing the days to white cards doing the days when they're like counting down to the nanites. White in film usually denoting like a fade to white being either a dream or death. So that's sort of like a little bit of, visual cue there, kind of foreshadowing. But what's interesting is that it was actually Kurt's idea, and I thought it was a really good one, that he had, of just a part where he was like sleeping in the chair, just on one of the days where he's just like passed out sleeping in the chair, which held for a while, yeah. But if you listen to the soundtrack there, he's like snoring and coughing quietly, but you can also start to hear the sound of wind out there.
Nice touch.
Very subtly.
We started to wonder if someone could survive with their legs broken for like 2 weeks.
Well, that's when you just have to say it's a movie.
Right.
7 hours, you're fine.
Even when I read the script, I was like, wait, both his legs are broken and he's still alive?
Yeah.
just in a lot of pain.
But to be fair, Duran's not a medic. Maybe he's just a big crybaby.
That was something that we thought too. Like, oh, maybe he's just hurt bad.
That's an insult that Ada would say.
Well, and I also really loved, like, at this part, this is kind of also where all the gloves come off. So, like, the whole, like, you know, you like my wife, I'm nothing like her. Like, this was great in terms of the building of the story because, like, it doesn't have to be subtext anymore. And I remember, actually, Jim, that was something because you helped with the workshopping and the rewriting of the script. And actually, a little factoid, Jim was one of the people who suggested actually the Joshua Tree sequences, which weren't originally in the first draft of the script, but came about through the rewrites. But I remember we had you gave me a very, I think, great piece of advice in terms of like, by the time you get to this part of a film, when you get this close to the end, there doesn't need to be subtext anymore. It's just like, can you just have the characters say what's going on? And I was like, yeah. So one of my favorite parts in the movie actually is coming up in the dream sequence, but it's like when Duran says, that night at Joshua Tree, we made love and then you aborted our child. Spoilers. But it was definitely one of those things where I remember thinking, like, I didn't want to write that line because I was like, oh, well, shouldn't the audience just get that? And it was quite the education for me to be like, audiences don't get things.
Yeah.
Audience need to.
And dreams are subtext. You don't need subtext in a dream. So if
Right. That's a good point.
It's already something.
I remember those conversations about those scenes, and you were trying to do subtext and be all kind of, keep it, underneath the surface.
He's
I'm like,
an artist.
say it.
He's an artiste.
Just say it. She had an abortion.
That's a keeper right there, Neil. That's like film school teaching right there. You don't need subtext in a dream.
Means all subtext.
Oh, wait, here it is. Okay, shush up. This is like the best thing. I tell you, Monty, and I told you this when I saw like an early cut of this whole sequence blew my mind.
Yay.
Everything, performance, visuals, like music, everything about this, I'm like, this is art house filmmaking right here. This is, I mean, I love this sequence so much. And this is the sequence when I saw it that I'm like, I think that we got something special here. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that all of these sequences that people love are at the end of the movie. But I will say,
did think of this, and it really did come out like more than I expected. I double what Mike's saying.
yeah,
I feel like you could take this section of the film and also like the campfire section, and it could be almost like put those like two together and make some weird art house film. It could be a separate short film itself.
Space 2.0. Yeah, so this was interesting. This once again is what I love about how filmmaking can be so permeable, is that we had 5 days to shoot in Fonco Studios. We shot half of the movie in 4 days, and we shot this one sequence in 1 day, which is like 4 minutes in the film. And it was like such a return to like, well, I remember, and you could probably attest to this, Neil, the big shot that ends the film, that's a little like quasi-Vertigo-esque, kind of like the camera, it was on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, you're saying the end of the sequence or the film?
The end of the sequence, the end of the dream sequence. Yeah.
Which is kind of the end of the film.
Yeah. But what I love is the end of that shot. You were basically filming that shot with the actors while we were breaking down the set.
Oh yeah. It's just,
Oh wow.
gotta get the F out of Dodge. We're like, all right, you guys break it down. We don't need the sound sync. We can just film this final thing.
But that's how up against it we were.
Yeah. And just gonna go back to the colors. That was the final culmination of like the promise of like the characters' colors. So in that moment, that was the colors finally intertwining, and they're on the other person at that point. Just to get all geeky for a second there.
Yeah, you can really see the yellow and the red here.
Yeah.
Laura,
the
I
yellow
was
on me and the red
so impressed with your performance in this sequence. I thought it was just stunning. Like,
thank you.
it's really beautiful. Nice work.
It's amazing.
I know I did a decent job if my mom even likes it.
Oh,
My mom goes, "Well done." I go, "Oh, what?
oh.
I never get a well done."
Well, and then, Dad, you brought Beautiful Dreamer back into the music of this. Talk about the music for a second. Yeah.
Okay, very intense scene, so I had to have some very intense music. Okay, when the lights flashed, I had a little zap there and things like that. A lot of metallic sounds, a lot of things like that. But as it progresses, and you'll notice that on the character, no more makeup when they kiss finally, and
Yep.
there was a little tiny theme I had of the menacing while they're doing the scene where he's using that voice, and when it all softened when they finally kissed, I used Beautiful Dreamer. But they weren't out of trouble. So right at the end, I used that little menacing theme with it too.
And unless I'm mistaken, the first part of the dream sequence when she falls over. Yeah, we're coming up to that shot
precious. Look at us kissing.
now. Yeah. You used backward masking of actual dialogue in that.
Yes. Well, yeah, I used backwards. Well, I wrote a little theme in 12 tone.
Okay.
Tone, and I used that backwards when he's entering.
So, and then we get back to, let's talk about the song. Actually, there's two songs that are really important in the movie. One written by Jim and one written by Mac, and they kind of dovetail finally. Like, in my opinion, I feel like the songs help like finalize the final uplifting message of the film. Friendship, communication, touching, like the image of hands grabbing each other repeats over and over in the film. So the idea is that the space between us must be merged, that we must finally come together, be it romantically, be it through friendship, be it through understanding. That was the big ultimate thing to me. And I remember having this discussion with you, Cooper. It's just like, if I don't figure out an ending that brings more to the table than just everybody dying in space, then the audience is going to feel like they wasted their time.
Yeah.
So, and actually, the final shot on the chair, Neil, that was so well done and so like do it yourself.
I think we had for the planetary debris that was coming in. We're like, how do we do this? How do we get some more atmosphere in here? Because again, we're in your bedroom. And you finally had the idea, like, how about flour? Runs in, grabs a bag of flour. We just kind of sprinkle that coming in just to have little like light particles and
dirt. And that is my hand.
And doing it in the lens just to give that little lens flare kind of feel.
Yep. The last shot is my hand. Yeah. Woo! Yay!
I don't count
Yay.
Yes,
Monty,
Cooper.
it didn't come up, but the udo, that word, it's Japanese, it means to seed.
Ah, that's right.
And specifically, ginseng root seeds. So not just, terraforming, but terraforming to heal. So
Right.
deep cut, but that's what we were going for.
I love
Yep.
that.
So it's a story about people who want to plant their seed.
Sick.
Subtext.
Don't cheapen it.
Sorry, Dad.